everyone, welcome to a video on adding and subtracting with negative numbers. So negative numbers, we all know, we've all been there in a math class. Most of the time, if you make a mistake on a problem, calculating something out, trying to do some algebra, it's because you had a problem with your negative numbers. You lost a negative sign or got confused with a negative sign somewhere. So I'm hopefully this tutorial will help you out working with adding and subtracting. Okay, let's take a look at some problems. Again, as we get into adding, subtracting, working with negative numbers, you gotta have something kind of concrete to hold on. So whether it's a number line and thinking, okay, positive means I'm increasing, there's a positive direction. Negative, I'm decreasing, I'm going to the left. Number lines are really helpful. Oftentimes thinking about money, owing money, getting money, that's helpful for kind of making sense of negative numbers and what's going on. So let's take a look at this first problem here. We got negative 3 plus 5. And I want to figure out a way to add that. The answer is 2, but let's kind of think about what's going on here. I'm starting off with negative 3. So on my number line, I'm going to find negative 3. And I'm adding to that. So adding means I'm going into this positive direction here. So I'm going positive 5 units. I'm going to the right because it's a positive, it's adding. So negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I end up with a positive 2. That's on the number line. Okay, another way to think about that is if I owe somebody $3, so I'm negative $3, but I have $5 in my pocket, the net effect then is I only have $2 in my pocket. And you kind of get into this idea of the commutative property too. Negative 3 plus 5 is the same as 5 plus negative 3. $5 in my pocket, and I owe someone $3, I end up with $2. So commutative property says if it's addition, doesn't matter what order you add them in. They're the same thing. Okay, now let's take a look at, well, what if I have negative 3 plus a negative number? So now I'm adding two negative numbers together. Well, I'm still starting off at negative 3, like before, but now I'm adding to that the opposite of 5. So I'm adding 5, I have the opposite of 5, I have negative 5. So I go in the opposite direction because it's not positive 5 I'm adding, it's negative 5 I'm adding. So I'm adding to that, think about it as I have a negative 3 and I'm adding to that even a more negative number. So the net effect is I'm really negative. I'm compounding my negativity. If I owe somebody $3 and then I do something dumb and I owe them $5 more, altogether I owe them $8. That's kind of where a way to think about this type of problem. Okay, so that's adding. So we just did two examples of adding on a number line there. Let's do the same numbers, negative 3 and 5, but now let's look at subtracting. The way to deal with subtracting, again, because you get so many negatives and so many subtraction signs, turn all subtraction into adding. You turn every subtraction problem into an addition problem, the opposite sign. The opposite sign. So what does that mean? So instead of negative 3 minus 5, I can think of that as negative 3 plus negative 5. So I'll show you on a picture here. So I got negative 3. So that's where I'm starting with still. If I subtract 5, I'm going in a negative direction. That's subtracting 5. And we end up with negative 8. Well, but just before, we already saw that negative 3 plus negative 5 also equals negative 8. So that's why this works, is negative, adding two negatives, I can think of it as the same as subtraction. Subtraction and addition are really related. So if they both equal negative 8, then it must not matter if I think of it as negative 3 plus negative 5, or if I think about it as negative 3 minus 5. They both mean the same thing. However, I still would encourage you to turn all subtraction problems into adding, because then you can see clearly this negative sign is supposed to go with that -5. And if everything's addition, you can move things around easier. You're not going to lose a negative sign as easy. Things just work out nicer. So anytime you have a subtraction sign, any sort of math class, you have full reign to change it into adding with the negative. And sometimes it makes it a lot nicer and you don't make as many mistakes. Plus, let's take a look at this next example. -3 minus -5. So now I've got two negative numbers, I'm subtracting them. Watch what happens. I'm going to turn my subtraction into adding the opposite sign. So that's -3. Instead of subtraction, I'm going to make it plus the opposite of -5. But the opposite of -5 becomes +5. -3 plus 5 is much easier to think about and comprehend rather than -3 minus -5 and trying to figure out what is going on in there. So again, -3 plus 5, I end up right at 2. And the only thing I can say is when we have two negative signs, since the negative is the opposite of positive, we kind of have a double negative going on. The negative, the opposite of the opposite, is right back in the same direction that I began with. So that's why -3 minus -5 is the same as -3 plus 5. Okay, hopefully that was a helpful review. Again, try to use the number line, try to point out again some examples that are the same. You can see the relationship between adding and subtracting. I can rewrite every subtraction problem into an addition problem. And again, trying to keep a really good grasp of what's positive and what's negative and how to keep track of it all.